Milk is a bodily fluid. You know that. You just never think about it because it arrives in a carton with a picture of a green field on it. But it is not a product. It is something warm that came out of the body of a large animal. And this morning you poured it into your coffee and drank it and went to work. Now picture the first person who ever did that. Somewhere, thousands of years ago, somebody is standing in a field next to an animal the size of a small car. Horns longer than their arms, over 1,000 pounds of muscle that could kill them by shifting its weight. And this person does not run from it and does not try to kill it. They get down on the ground. They crawl underneath it, between its back legs, and they start touching it. Then they drink what comes out. What kind of person does that? Not what kind of clever inventor. What kind of person? What has to have happened in someone's life? What has to be going on inside their head for that to be the next thing they try? And it gets worse because it did not stop there. They went back the next day and did it again. Then they told other people about it. Then they somehow convinced those people to do it too. And everyone agreed this was normal. And 9,000 years later, it is sitting in your fridge door with a screw cap on it. You almost certainly have a theory about that person right now. Everyone does. Hold on to it, because that image is how the entire world pictures this story, and it is completely wrong. Nothing like that ever happened, and the real answer is so much stranger than whatever you are currently thinking. Here is the first crack in it. The humans who drank milk first almost certainly could not digest it. It made them sick. They knew it made them sick, and they did it anyway for thousands of years. Start with the animal, because your mental picture of that is wrong too. Around 10,500 years ago, in the Fertile Crescent, somebody managed to do something that should have been impossible. They domesticated the aurochs. If the word means nothing to you, picture this. The aurochs was the wild ancestor of every cow alive today, and it was nothing like a cow. It stood close to 6 feet at the shoulder. It carried long, forward-curving horns. It was fast, powerful, and famously bad-tempered. Julius Caesar wrote about them centuries later and described animals that spared neither man nor beast. So go back to that person crouching in the field. It could not have happened. Not like that. You do not walk up to an aurochs and start milking it any more than you walk up to a wild bull elephant and start milking that. There is no version of that scene where the person survives. Anyone brave enough to try it died in the attempt, and whatever they discovered died with them. And it almost certainly happened more than once, which means the first person to drink cow's milk was not brave at all. The bravery is not the interesting part. Something much slower had to happen first. So the real story starts much slower and much less dramatically than a single brave person and a single bold idea. Genetic work led out of University College London traced every domesticated taurine cow on the planet back to a founding population of roughly 80 wild aurochs captured in the Near East about 10,500 years ago. 80 animals. That is the entire genetic bottleneck behind every dairy herd in every country on Earth. Somebody penned 80 animals, and then their descendants spent the next 2,000 years breeding them into something smaller, calmer, and slower to panic. That is the actual invention, not milking, taming. It took generations of patient, unglamorous work by people whose names nobody will ever know, and the payoff arrived long after all of them were dead. Only then does milk become possible. The earliest hard evidence we have comes from pottery. Fats soak into unglazed clay and stay there for thousands of years, and modern chemistry can pull them back out and identify what they came from. At a site called Barsan Hoyuk in northwestern Turkey, occupied between roughly 6,600 and 6,000 BC, researchers analyzed residues trapped in the vessels. Around 70% of the samples came back as dairy fat. 70%. These were not people who occasionally encountered milk. These were people whose daily cooking revolved around it. And when you look at the very earliest pottery at the site, the milk residue is already there, which tells you something quietly remarkable. The first farmers who arrived in that region did not invent dairying after they settled. They showed up already knowing how to do it. The knowledge traveled with them. Evidence in pots is one thing. Evidence in bodies is better. At the University of York, an archaeologist named Sophie Charlton went looking for milk inside people. not in their stomachs, which are long gone, but in their teeth. When dental plaque hardens into calculus, it traps molecules from whatever a person was eating and preserves them for millennia. Charlton's team examined the teeth of Neolithic farmers who lived in Britain around 6,000 years ago. And in 7 individuals, they found beta-lactoglobulin, a whey protein that exists in milk and essentially nowhere else. It is species-specific, which means the same technique can tell you whether someone was drinking from a cow, a sheep, or a goat. That is about as direct as ancient evidence gets. Not a pot that once held milk. Actual milk protein, sealed in the mouths of specific people, still identifiable after 6,000 years. So we know they drank it. Which brings us to the problem. Every human is born able to digest milk. Your body produces an enzyme called lactase, which breaks lactose, the sugar in milk, into pieces small enough to absorb. That is standard mammal equipment, and it exists so that infants can survive. And in most mammals, including most humans throughout most of history, the body switches lactase production off after weaning. There is no reason to keep making an enzyme for a food you will never encounter again. When an adult without lactase drinks milk, the lactose passes through undigested, pulls water into the gut, and ferments. The result is bloating, cramps, and diarrhea. Not dangerous usually, just deeply unpleasant. The ability to keep producing lactase into adulthood is called lactase persistence, and it comes from a genetic mutation. The obvious assumption is that this mutation appeared first and dairying followed, or at least that the two rose together. They did not. In 2022, a team led by Richard Evershed at the University of Bristol and Mark Thomas at University College London published a study in Nature that quietly rewrote the entire story. They assembled fat residue data from nearly 7,000 pottery fragments across Europe and compared it against ancient DNA from over 1,000 prehistoric individuals. They built a map of when and where people were drinking milk and laid it directly over a map of when and where the lactase persistence gene actually spread. The two maps did not match. Milk consumption was widespread across Europe for thousands of years, while lactase persistence remained rare. The variant appears in the ancient DNA record around 4700 BC, but it stays uncommon until roughly 1000 BC. That is a gap of thousands of years during which enormous numbers of people were regularly consuming a substance their bodies could not process. They knew it made them sick, presumably, and they kept doing it anyway. Part of the answer is that they were not usually drinking it fresh. Fermentation solves the problem for you. When bacteria get into milk, they consume the lactose and convert it into lactic acid, which is why yogurt, aged cheese, and soured milk are tolerable to almost everyone regardless of genetics. The bacteria do the digesting your body cannot. And we know Neolithic people were doing exactly this because perforated clay sieves recovered in Poland, dated to around 7,000 years ago, carry dairy fat residues and are, functionally, cheese strainers. Cheese making is nearly as old as pottery itself. So for thousands of years, humans solved lactose intolerance culturally rather than biologically. They processed the milk instead of evolving. Which leaves the real question. If fermentation already worked, and if plain milk only caused discomfort, what finally pushed the lactase persistence gene to sweep across Europe? Evershed and Thomas's answer is bleak, and it reframes the whole story. It was not nutrition. Their data showed no relationship between how intensively a region practiced dairying and how quickly lactase persistence spread there. The advantage was not about extracting a few more calories in ordinary years. It was about famine and disease. Think about what happens in a bad year. The harvest fails, grain stores empty, people are starving, and the one food source still standing in the field is the herd. So you drink the milk, all of it, fresh, because you cannot afford to lose calories to processing, and you cannot afford to wait. At the same time, malnutrition and crowding and desperation drive infectious disease through the population. Now the mild inconvenience becomes lethal. Lactose-driven diarrhea in someone already dehydrated by dysentery, already starving, already immunocompromised, is not an embarrassing afternoon. It is a cause of death. Under those conditions, someone carrying the lactase persistence variant survives, and someone without it does not. So the gene did not spread during the long, comfortable centuries of routine dairy farming. It spread in the disasters, Every famine, every epidemic, every displaced and starving population was an event that selectively removed people who could not digest milk. The trait in your body, if you have it, was written by catastrophe, and it happened more than once. Lactase persistence has evolved independently at least 5 separate times in different human populations through 5 distinct mutations. Europe, East Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, different genetic solutions to the same pressure arrived at separately, which is about as strong a signal as evolution ever gives you that something mattered enormously. But the flip side is just as revealing. Not every dairying population evolved it. Herders across Central Asia have relied on milk for thousands of years and remain largely lactose non-persistent to this day. Their solution stayed cultural: fermented mare's milk, aged cheese, yogurt. They never needed the gene because they never stopped processing the milk first, which means that if you can drink a glass of milk today without consequence, you are not the normal case. Globally, most adults are lactase non-persistent. You are the descendant of a specific lineage that got hit hard enough, often enough, that the mutation became worth having. There is one last detail I find genuinely difficult to shake. In Bavaria, archaeologists have recovered small clay vessels from Bronze Age and Iron Age infant graves. They are tiny, sized to fit in a baby's hands, with a narrow spout for suckling. Some of them are shaped like animals with little feet. They are, unmistakably, baby bottles. Julie Dunn, a biomolecular archaeologist at Bristol, analyzed the residue inside them and found ruminant dairy fat. Animal milk, fed to human infants thousands of years ago. They were buried with the children who used them. That is the whole story compressed into one object. Somebody's parents, 3,000 years ago, took milk from an animal their ancestors had spent 2,000 years learning to tame, put it in a cup shaped like a little animal because they thought a baby would like it, and fed their child. And then, when that child died, they put the cup in the grave. So go back one last time to that person in the field, the one crouched under an animal that could kill them, doing something inexplicable, discovering milk in a single mad moment. They never existed. There was no first person. There was no moment of revelation, no flash of insight, nobody to put a name to. There was a chain of people thousands of years long, each one handed a slightly tamer animal and a slightly better technique than the generation before, every single one of them dying long before the thing they were building was finished. Not one of them knew they were building anything at all. That is the part worth sitting with. The most ordinary object in your fridge is the finished product of a project that took longer than recorded history, run by people who could not have imagined you, and who got no credit because there was no single discovery to credit anyone for. You are the end of that chain, and this morning you poured it into a cup without thinking about it once.